Today's class is on not on the RPA directly. It's on a resource that we have through the MLS or through the CAR. And so, and it's a great resource to be able to use 3 different ways. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and get on, and I'm going to share my screen. And how you get on it is through, let me get, hold on a second. Okay, can you see this? You can see now my screen, everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're going to do now is go on to California Association of Realtors, CAR.org. For our company, CBABR, we have our cool banker, but I generally go through the CAR.org. And what do we all do when we get on CAR.org? We actually go right here. There's a lot of resources on this page for everyone, including all the stuff that's going on for coronavirus. I got a call from one of our agents the other day saying, well, I don't know how to use the coronavirus forms, or should I use the forms, or what they're for. So we've done some reporting out of that, but you could actually, there are webinars on here that you could actually go to. Right here, there's upcoming COVID webinars. There's some that are already been taped that you can access. So if you want to know anything about, especially the COVID era right now, all the resources are right here on the screen. What we're going to do though is go to the Transaction Center. Uh-oh, my screen went a little bit. See if I can get it down here. All right. Oh, that messed it up too. All right, hold on. I'm going to go back out and go in again. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're going to go to the Transaction Center here instead. And what we're going to do is go to Forms Tutor. It's a resource and it's a benefit that you get from your dues. And as you can see, there's a lot of products and things you have right here. But we want to go to Forms Advisor, and what we're going to go to specifically is Forms Tutor today. So I'll click that on. There we go. Forms Advisor just tells you what kind of forms goes with certain transactions. That's probably a nice other class that we'll get to at some point. But today we're going to focus on Forms Tutor, which is here's how you would access the forms. Now, I want to preface this by saying we've got agents from different companies and different areas on here. And so some offices have different procedures than we do, and different areas have different nuances and variances as well. One, for instance, is on the Forms Tutor when it does load, is it states in the Forms Tutor that generally 3% is down, you have the buyer put down 3% as a down payment when you're doing the purchase agreement. Well, that might be in some areas. Our area pretty much, and Tom will hopefully agree or tell me if I'm anything different, is 1%. It can be less. It can be, I've seen some people, like in some attorneys, if you deal with them, might want 10, maybe some sellers might want 10, but for our area specifically, generally speaking, it's 1%. So now this, the form has come up, the RPA form, but in the RPA, this is a Forms Tutor. We're going to specifically go and look at this one today, but you can see all the forms. There's up to 100 forms on here that you could access and be able to go into, and actually it goes paragraph by paragraph and it explains it all to you. Most of these forms we don't use, and some offices use some forms, some offices don't use other forms. But if you want to go further into it, it does have the residential listing agreement in here. It does have the agency disclosure. It has the agent's visual inspection disclosure. Certainly check it out and talk to your mentor about it. So we're going to go into here today. So the purpose of this is threefold. So we're going to look at this from 3 different perspectives. One is, if you're a new agent, and I know we have several new agents on the call today, this is a great way to go paragraph or section by section through the purchase agreement. It explains each section in detail, in fairly good detail. So if you're a new agent and you just want to learn about some of these forms, the primary forms we use, it's a great tool for you for that purpose. I'm going to go ahead. And now I'm putting this in. Now for the other two purposes, it would be for a listing, if you've just taken a listing, or if you've just gone in under contract. Hopefully you have explained the contract to your client. If you've got an offer, you go over it with your client. But sometimes with this digital world, they say, oh, just send it to me, you know, I trust you. I recommend that you not just send it to them digitally, but also by email so that they can review and ask them to call you with questions and to go over the contract. But this is what I send to my buyer right after I go in under contract. Even though I've gone over the contract, I don't go over it segment by segment. I kind of paraphrase it. I give it to them so that they could actually go paragraph by paragraph. So I'm going to email it to myself. You could email it right now directly to your client, but I wouldn't recommend that you do that because you want to show your value, because you'll see in a minute, it's a pretty generic message that they send to your client with the link to get on. But I think my value is I'm touching that client. I want to be the one to touch the client and not CAI. So when I put my email in, or if you want to use your clients, then just do it generically. But for me, I do it on my own, and I just hit share. And it'll tell me that right here, and the email was sent. So I'm going to go to my email, and it'll come in. There's two that usually come in. Okay, so it's this one right here. So you go to this email, and what you get in this email, and you can see my screen, everyone, right? Tom?
It's coming in weird, Vicki.
It kind of froze, Vic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you see the email though?
No.
It's a diagonal. You can't read it. It's not readable, Vicki.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's too bad. Let me go back to, is this okay?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, what I'm going to share with you is that it sends you a link, and it says, here's your link to review the contract or the RPA. And then it gives you a password. So I copy the link. I email that to my client, and here's a copy of, I don't know if you'll be able to see this since you couldn't see the other one. Can you see this email? Or is it blurry too?
It didn't do anything.
It's just the same screen.
All right. Anyway, my email says, hi, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, or buyer, whichever it is. If I'm sending it to the seller, the reason I'm sending this to the seller is because I've just listed it and I want to get them a copy of the contract as soon as I can. It's another way to touch your client after you take a listing. And then if they get a copy of this contract, and I encourage them to go over it because it is interactive, I then tell them to go over the contract, and if they have any questions, you know, to please call me in advance. Now, what this does, it's called risk management. So when they say down the line that they didn't get the contract, or that we didn't go over the contract, or they didn't understand the contract, if you send it at the listing portion, and then when they go under contract, they clearly have gotten the contracts and should have asked questions by then. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the link. I got to go back to my email. There's the link. All right, can you see that? Interactive
Yes.
residential purchase agreement?
Yes.
Okay, good. Now we're on the page. Now we're going. Now we're cooking. So this is what will pop up when you hit the link. I'm sorry you couldn't see it on my email. They go down here for the menu. And over here is, or you can, these buttons right here, you could go one page at a time and back. Or you can go up here and you can go this way, the consumer can do it. But for you new agents, I'd recommend that you go through this and you actually click on the links and read what every paragraph says. So we're going to start with the agency disclosure. Again, this is not a purchase agreement class, but I do think that the agency disclosure is important, so I do want to show that to you. So if you'll notice here, and we get to the RPA, there'll be a lot more little links over here. This little finger here, I don't know, is that a middle finger? No, okay, it's a pointer finger, sorry. Anyway, agency disclosure is something that you need to present before you present your offer or before you have the listing agreement signed. You have to present that first. And Tom, you want to kind of go over, not the whole agency thing, but some of the highlights of it for me?
Yeah, can you hear me okay, Vic? Okay, so what the agency, as Vicki said, it's the first document, whether you're writing an offer or taking a listing, it's the first document that has to be signed. Now, fortunately, on Zipforms, they bundled it, so it's the first one that you're going to see. But it does say what the possible agency relationships will be. And when an offer comes in, then that will be declared on page 1 of the purchase agreement. Always, if you have a listing, Coldwell Banker, in our case, Associated Brokers Realty, will always be representing the seller. The question is whether they will also be representing the buyer. If somebody from any one of our 3 offices were to write an offer and get it accepted, then we are, as a company, in a dual agent position. But it talks about the seller, what the seller's agent's responsibility is, the buyer's agent, and then if you're doing a dual agent. On both of them, seller or buyer, you have the, everybody basically has to due diligence, they have to be honest, trustworthy, and all of that. The only difference is whomever you are representing is you have a fiduciary responsibility to them. And those that have been through NATO remember that fiduciary responsibility is the highest level of trust, as in a trustee required under the law. So, and then Vicki did touch on something in here. It's the first document. If they prove that it was signed after the purchase agreement or the listing agreement, let's say it's a day later or something like that, the penalty is possible forfeiture of your commission. So what that means is you still get to do the transaction, you just get to do it for free. And that is no good. And that will, I do expert witness work, as most of you know, under agency and agent responsibility in court. And that's one of the first things that they look at is who is representing whom, and did they fulfill their responsibility. Did that answer it, Vicki?
Yes, I wanted you to explain that, especially from the perspective of an expert witness. And then if you just go on to that little arrow or that hand with the pointer finger, it then explains that form. So this is the explanation of the title for that particular form, disclosure regarding agency. So I'm not going to go into the PRBS or the WFA or the BS and all the other stuff, just the RPA today. So page 1. So this is what's really cool about this, guys, is, they've got all the paragraphs. And Teresa, are you on the call? Did you see her, Tom?
She was on there. Okay. Teresa, if you're on, can you unmute?
I just wanted to share with her, well, actually your son, Michael, the genius, figured out what these color codes were, because I couldn't figure out. I asked Teresa, but it's just every section has their own color. That's all it means. So this is section 1, section 2 is blue, section 3 is green, and then so on and so forth. So if you go in,
well, he's got my DNA, of course.
Say your DNA. So here date prepared is just, here's the explanation for it. Date prepared. It's the date that you actually complete the offer. It may not be the date that it's signed, but it's the date that you prepare it. Going on to confirmation. So anyway, this goes into the purchase price. You put the purchase price right over here. Make sure, guys, this is a side note for you, but if you don't start this contract up here on the dollar sign, and you try to go down here and put your initial deposit and everything else, it will not auto calculate. So make sure that you start up here. So if you click on that, it says, there it is, the real property identifies the property by address and legally recorded document. Make sure that you put in the price, and 3G should be the same, that's further down. And this is an interesting right here. Close of escrow date is not aspirational, it is contractual. And this is really kind of important, highlight to note, because I've heard lenders and other people say, oh, well, it's just a target date. Hell no. It's a contract, and your client, a buyer or seller, can be in breach of contract and have a right to cancel under certain terms. So, and I think Drake from Coldmaker Town and Country did a great offer presentation class a couple weeks ago, and he and I agree on this, but it's whatever you want to do. Legal wants us to actually put a date certain in there, you know, but some people just can't figure that out. It's a lot easier to start your timelines and everything if you put date certain, but certainly days is going to be just fine. Going back to some other things. So the financially, okay, so the confirmation is really important because Tom just went over that, and it kind of goes over who, you know, the check boxes, making sure that you check the right boxes, and it tells you, you know, kind of specifically what they're there for. And at the bottom, it says, no matter who has your back, every agent is required to treat all parties honestly and fairly. Going back to Tom's point of that's your fiduciary responsibility to act in the best interest of the client. So then if you go down here, we'll go here again. I'm not going to spend too much time, which is going to be a fairly short class, because this is what you, as the agent, as a new agent, or maybe you're a seasoned agent. I saw a couple of seasoned agents on here. Why don't you play with this? This is a lot of fun. I've been doing this now for over a year when I finally discovered that it was there. And it is relatively new, actually. I think it's only a couple years old. I love looking at this, and as a new agent, and it'll explain, you know, because you're not in a contract now, or if you are, certainly do it again. I know that your mentor, if you're in a contract, will go over parts of this, but usually not line by line. And this does, it's right here for you. So when you put the initial deposit, it tells you what, this is the amount of money that will you're putting down initially. And this is where they have the 3%. Typical deposit is 3%. Again, it varies. It can be $500 or 1% generally is what we use, 5, 10%, whatever the seller requires or the seller's representative. And then it goes down into the loans, and it kind of explains the different loans. The default is conventional, of course. It's not on here unless you check one of these boxes. And when you check one of these boxes, generally there might be another attachment or an addendum that will automatically go onto the contract. So just be aware of that. And then we have additional financing terms. This part is pretty self-explanatory, but I did want to go over this one here. There are things that affect financing which affect the price of the property. And generally what you're going to be putting in here are the recurring and non-recurring closing costs that the buyer needs to, or the program allows for, to save a few dollars for the buyer. And so in this place, you would put it right there, not on page 2, 3, or 5. I've seen them in some of the strangest places where they tried to hide where they want the seller to pay 3% of their closing costs or $6,000 or whatever the number is. But this is where it goes. So I wanted to make sure I pointed that out. Don't hide it. And then when we go to page 2, if there's any questions, go ahead and ask. Tom will ask you just to let me know if there's any questions on this. But as you can see, this is all very interactive, and your client. So if you're in escrow already, or you signed a contract last night and you contact your client the next day or within 48 hours, send them this contract again and tell them, because they're going to be able to actually go through this and click on all these little pointer fingers and have a lot of their questions answered. There's
Vicki,
yes.
I'm sorry. This is Foxy. I have a question. Okay, on what you're saying in this is for them to read before you actually send the actual ones, the real ones, correct? This is for them to understand what you're going to send to them.
Actually, no. You can use it in 2 places. If you have a seller and a listing, and you've taken the listing, I send it to my seller so they get familiar with the contract before we even sign a contract, before we even get an offer. So that's one way of utilizing this resource. The other one is, once you've got an offer, you're going to go over it with your client, right, Tom? You're going to sit them down, or you're zoom them out, or whatever it is now, zoom them in, and you're going to go, you have the ability to do the exact same thing with the actual purchase agreement sent by another agent. So you're going to go over this contract anyway, and explain most of it. You're going to paraphrase most of it. So that's what your mentor will help you do when you get, help just show you what elements you really do need to go over with the buyer. The beauty of this, Roxy, is this will go out within 24 to 48 hours. Because remember, you have 17 days for your inspection period, appraisal, and those kinds of things. So if you send this out in the first 12 to 48 hours or 24 to 48 hours, your buyer then, and your seller has an ability to look at that again and just say, here's the purchase agreement. It explains it in full detail. If you'd like to go over it, here's the link, and please feel free to go over it and call me if you have any additional questions after they've gone through it. It's just an enhancement to the transaction. It's just a way of helping the consumer understand what they have signed, what they're going to sign, if it's in the listing period. So
Can I add on to that?
Sure.
Actually, what it does also, Roxy, and everybody on here, is it shows your intent. So like Vicki said, if you explain it on a Zoom call, since we can't do it in person, or we're not supposed to do it in person, you explain it, you paraphrase, and then you follow up with this. If something were to go awry later on, and they say, did you explain it? Say, not only did I explain it, I sent this document along that they could get further explanation, and it's from the state's or CAR's viewpoint. And so it's going to show that you went the extra step, and that goes a long way, as Vicki can verify in court. If we've done what we can do, then that's all that we can do. So versus most people, most agents, especially at other companies, they will just send the contract and say, okay, DocuSign it or digitally sign it, and the buyer doesn't have a clue what they were agreeing to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've had clients. I'm really heavy on making sure that hey, I'll call you and we'll go over it, or can we Zoom and I'll go over it. And occasionally I'll get a client who'll say, oh no, just send it to me, I trust you. Well, I do then still email it to them, and I ask them if they have any questions to go over it, and if they have any questions to call me. But what this does is, if it kind of is a stay out of jail document, that if you're ever called into court because they said, I didn't understand what I signed, you send it to me electronically, I don't know what was in it, you can say, oh no, I also send this to you, and asked you for further questions if you had any. So it's really more of a risk management resource. Great learning resource for new agents.
One more interjection on that, Vicki. Remember, if something does go bad, the attorneys, their job is to try to make you look incompetent. So because then they're trying to get at our E&O or your company's E&O if you're with somebody besides CBABR. So they will ask you questions like, did you explain section 14, which is all of page, I think it's 5, might be page 6. It's about timelines and contingency removal. Did you explain that to the client so they knew how the seller, for example, can get out of a contract and what timelines had to be met? And if you don't know that, you're going to look pretty bad in front of the attorneys, or if it goes to court in front of a judge. So what you can do, because there are a lot of new agents on here, have this emailed like Vicki did in the very beginning and talked about. Have this emailed to yourself and read through it. Read the bullet points that that your clients are going to see. These where the fingers are pointing to. So you're going to learn how to explain it. And you don't have to do the whole thing at one time. Do 1 page a day and just learn what's in there. If you try to do the whole thing at one time, you're going to go to sleep. But just, take a half hour a night, turn off Big Bang Theory reruns for a little bit, and go through 1 page a night and learn it. And it's going to give you a lot of confidence, especially you new agents, that you're actually going to know what this is all about. And then if you have questions, then ask your mentors or manager after that.
Thanks, Tom. Perfect. So, and this over here kind of tells the different paragraphs are in this section. I want to go over addenda and advisories very quickly as well. I'm just highlighting some things. As I said, these are the check boxes, and it tells you what they're for. But I want to just caution you, because when you're for the new agents especially, and I've seen it with seasoned ones too, when you actually check any of these boxes, you know, addendum, whatever you want to put here, or other, maybe it's your office addendum, you have to, this isn't really the place to do it, because this is what happens. Our files, your files, I know all the offices that are on here, they have code enforcement and maintenance for their office, file maintenance for their offices, and transaction coordinators, and of course managers go over the contract. But when you click this box, so all our forms have to be in the file, is what I'm trying to say. But when you click one of these boxes, you're actually, it's now becoming a part of the contract, and the lender is going to require it. So you have to be very careful, because a lender, if they find you don't want to hide anything, you have to do full disclosure. But sometimes this can create a problem if you do that. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that one. And down here especially, this is the other area where they've got REO advisory, statewide advisory. We don't need that in the contract up front. We're going to get it in the normal timelines throughout the transaction when needed. The buyer has, seller has 7 days to get the disclosures to them, which would be the statewide, et cetera. And then they have 17 days with which to review. So just don't check a box unless you absolutely have to, or check with your mentor or manager.
Vicki, so I'm sorry about that. We don't click none of that. We just leave it blank then?
Just leave, there's one that's already pre-checked, which is this one right here, is the buyer's inspection advisory, because it already is a part of the contract. So it's already pre-checked for us. The other ones really are not that important unless your office policy is different. I can only tell you what ours is. If it's different, then do whatever your office for the other offices outside of CBABR.
Tom, do you do that? Do you click anything on that, or do you just leave it blank in our office?
Well, we don't require it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other terms, here's where I see a lot of stuff. This is where they put in financing terms. This is where they put in some crazy stuff, man. I had one client actually ask, I got an offer, and in that area right there was, and the seller's dog comes with property. And I thought that was, oh, this is kind of crazy. This agent's out, what's up? Well, I talked to the other agent, and he goes, no, that's true. They want it because your client said, my seller said, if you buy the house, I'll throw in the dog. And they took my client literally, and they put it right in here. But other things in here might be buyers related to real estate agent, or some other disclosure, or whatever else in there. I don't know what else generally Tom would go in there.
It's generally just something that would not be covered anywhere else in the contract. It is definitely, as Vicki said, it's not where you put financial terms. Financial terms should be on page 1 down at the bottom where it says other terms and conditions. But anything having to do with the cost, yeah, I see Tara put down, that's where other agents like to hide closing costs.
Yes.
Yes, a lot.
So, and then when we go to the next page, we just have the escrow and title. It explains escrow and title costs, and you know, what you need to put in there. I'll click on it really quickly. Here's where the parties pick who is responsible for paying the escrow fee and title, etc. Right in that area. And then the other costs of sale are right in here. You know, just you click, you figure out what if they have a state transfer or a city transfer tax, if they have an HOA, you know, don't check something if they don't have an HOA in the HOA area either. Down here, items included and excluded in the sale. This is an interesting one. I like to always bring this out. So if you're going to check what you want in what the buyer wants in the home, which is personal property. Generally, we sell real estate. The only personal property that we will generally go along with it will be the stove, oven, washer, and dryer. Not much more than that. Occasionally something else, but generally you should keep it within that. This is relatively new. It says right here, all stoves except. You need to check the stove here because that came in a little later, maybe about 5-6 years ago. It was for the purpose of a freestanding stove, not one that was already encased. But if you don't check this, and even though we've had cases, I think it was out of your office a couple of years ago, Tom, where our agent did not check the all stoves. The seller actually thought that they could take their stove because they liked it and it was a more expensive type stove.
Yeah.
So they just took the stove and left it blank, a hole right there. And because the agent didn't check that. So you need to make sure that you check all stoves. And then they had to replace, we didn't replace, they had to replace the stove. So make sure you put washer and dryer if they want the washer and dryer, all refrigerators, except if there's an exception, maybe they don't want the one in the garage. So I just want to put that out because, and the other area in this would be that, I'm too far ahead here.
Vicki, Tara asked a question on this. Can you touch on furniture added to the RPA? I have been seeing agents ask for additional random items in this section.
That's a good one. That's a great question.
Great question.
And I'm going to go right here as well too. So do not put the patio furniture and the barbecue, freestanding barbecue, and the living room furniture. That is all outside of escrow. Anything that they want a personal property other than what's in this contract generally is handled outside of escrow because we don't sell personal property. We sell real property. And generally speaking, if you start putting patio furniture in there or living room furniture or the whatever else, the lender very often then is going to have to actually appraise that independently as part of, because now you've incorporated it as part of the contract. So that's not the place to put personal property. And so I would probably, to Tara's point, I would counter that out if I saw it in the contract. Right, Tom?
I agree with that, yeah.
Here's the other important point I wanted to make on this. All items included in the sale, we don't care. It says right here, even though it's noted in the MLS, you can have the living room furniture, or you can have the washer and dryer, or you can have the refrigerator. Unless you put it in the contract in that paragraph that we were just at, if you do not include it in there, even though it's on the flyer that it's included, even though it's in the MLS it's included, it's not included unless it's in the contract. So we have lots of people from time to time, probably a handful every year, that have to buy washers and dryers and refrigerators because they didn't put it in. So make sure you check that.
We actually had an agent down here a few years ago that ended up buying 2 refrigerators, boom, boom, like within a week of each other because they'd missed it on offers that came in on their properties.
Yep. So now this page right here is mostly all statutory, statutorily required disclosures and the timelines. So I just wanted to, go through this. This is very dry, but it's very important. This is generally just for the buyer to let the buyer the type of disclosures they're going to be getting and when they're going to be getting them. And also in some paragraphs, they have websites where they can check out like Megan's Law, or if they've got, I think maybe gas lines is one of them as well. So that's something you can check out independently. This is the page that, and I think it's page 5, that Tom was alluding to earlier about timelines. And so this is really important, and that's when you go back to what the close of escrow is, the date close of escrow, and acceptance. So everything starts from the date of acceptance, which is the last signature obtained. So if you have no counteroffer and you send the contract and everything's cool, and it's when the seller signs the contract accepting that purchase agreement. If there's a counteroffer, the seller issues a counteroffer, and then the buyer signs the counteroffer. It's when the buyer signs it, that's when acceptance is. But if you go with another counter, so it's the last counteroffer or the last contract signed, the date starts at that point, your timelines, which is what all
that is day 0. That is day 0. The next day is day 1.
Correct. And then we have, this is where it says the seller has 7 days to get all of the inspections, like the termite if they asked for it, and to provide the report. So be on top of that immediately. And then you've got to get all of the disclosures to them. And then the buyer has 17 days with which. And so this will explain exactly in more detail those timelines, because that is an important element in your contract. And your transaction coordinator, for those of you who use them, especially our new agents will be, they will give you an outline of what those timelines are, but you're responsible for them, whether they give it to you or not. And it goes in here a lot of what's the seller's right to cancel. The buyer has a right to cancel. Again, there's certain different, depending upon what the contract's been breached or what has not been done by the buyer or the seller. Going on to page 7, again, this is just going in, what is the final verification? A note on this, please, guys. It's usually 5 days. I think it says 5 days prior to close of escrow. So that's the default. Do not waive that unless you absolutely have to, because that really is an important step, and it shows again your value. You need to make sure that you have that organized and schedule that final walkthrough within 5 days. You cannot do that as an agent, though. You cannot do it on behalf of your client. Let's say they're out of state or they're ill. Some people, I just found out, I think one of the buyers or sellers, I think one of our sellers is ill, and they couldn't do the home inspection. So there's some variances, but exemptions, but very, very, very few. So make sure that you make sure, and it's not you. They can send a neighbor, they can send a friend, they can send someone else to do the final verification at that time, but you're not the one to do it. So really not too much more in here. Joint escrow instructions. So we'll go on to the next page, see if there's anything. Liquidated damages, that's when they breach the contract and what portion of the deposit may be at risk if they do not perform. And so they'll go into that, and then it goes into the mediation and arbitration. And most of this is about as clear as mud, but their explanation, at least it's something that you can rely on. I just suggest that you read the explanation on these and be able to explain it to your client. We're getting towards the end. There's really not much. Just remember, you can click on any one of these and it's going to give you a breakdown exactly of what's on that paragraph or that section. And then the final page, of course, is the signature page. I'm just going to highlight a few things down here.
Before you get much past the timelines, Krista asked if the RLA has shortened timelines. I think she means if the RPA has shortened timelines and the buyer's agent doesn't honor them, what happens?
You mean if they don't do it within the timeline specified?
It's the same, whether it's shortened, extended, or whatever. You still have to follow the same protocols. You know, notice the buyer to perform, giving them 2 days to either do what they have to do contractually or remove the contingency. And it's the same protocols. It's just a shorter period of time to perform them.
Correct. Right. And if they don't perform or they're in breach, then you don't do a notice to perform, whichever party is in breach, and or demand to close escrow. But before you get to that point, any of our new agents for sure, talk to the mentor or managers so that we can explain that fully, because there are some there's some recourses there that you might want to follow before you go to that step. Okay, then one thing I do want to tell you for sure right here. Check this. If you're going to do a counteroffer, make sure this is checked. This is something we see all the time that doesn't get checked. Because if you don't check it, it does not attach itself. It doesn't incorporate into the contract and become part of the contract. It stands alone. And so if you want it as part of the contract, then you need to make sure you check this. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is the escrow, not the acknowledgement here, but the presentation of offer and the rejection of offer. CAR has taken a little bit more proactive approach on this now. It used to be, we can't make them do this, because especially when you've got multiple offer situation and the buyer wants to know that their offer was presented, you know, and there are some agents out there that don't present offers. And so if the other agent asks me to have my seller initial this, I'll do it. I usually just give them an email, but CAR is saying more and more, we probably should be utilizing these two, you know, either rejection and or that you presented the offer. So just a, you know, FYI. And then someone said, remember there was that checkbox back all those boxes, and I said, don't check any of those boxes, but there was one that's always pre-checked for the contract, the RPA. And this is the Buyer's Inspection Advisory. And it's really all this is, and it is attached to every RPA. And it just goes over the buyer's rights and the rights to have inspection and their obligation as well. So this is attached automatically, and it's a great outline for the buyer as to what that they need to expect or what they, disclosures they're entitled to. So that's pretty much all that I have for this right now. Anyone have any other questions?
Nothing in the chat.
Vicki, this is, kind of like off the subject about the way you explain the samples and everything. But I want to ask you about the inspection. Like I said, it's a way off topic. But when we go with the client with trying to inspect the property and everything, do we have this information to for inspections, and do we have these companies with us, or do we have to for example, I have to do the homework and find out companies that they can do
the home inspection?
For everything, home inspection, whatever, for termites inspection, anything. Do I have to provide that information, or you guys have the information for us?
I know Tom's your mentor, but mentors usually can go over that with you when you're writing the contract or when you take a listing. We do have different termite companies, as all companies do. Go to your mentor or your manager if you're new, and they will give you a list of termite companies, home inspection companies, geologists if they know, sometimes septic companies, those kinds of things. So when you take a listing, then certainly have that conversation and get that list.
Vicki, what was the question? I'm sorry, I had a call I had to take real quick.
It was, I think Roxy was asking that, where do I get a list? Who do I know where to go to get these inspections?
Oh, yeah, well, Roxy, we'll take care of that. I heard Vicki's last part, so we'll take care of that when it's time. You don't need to put the cart before the horse on that.
Thank you, Tom.
No problem, but there's a bunch of questions here now. So Tara, you are a questioning lady today. There was some freezing in the beginning. Will you please show us one more time how to get here?
Okay, got it. All right, so.
Sorry, she's had her coffee. So
you finally woke up, Tara, huh?
We know what Tara's like when she is on caffeine.
Yeah, okay. So what you're gonna do, I'll start from the very beginning. I'll start with the CAR. You go to CAR.org, okay? You can see my screen?
Yes.
All good? Okay. Transaction Center. Okay, we normally go here because we go to Zipforms right away, but not this time. We go to Transaction Center. And you could actually search here and go Forms Tutor right over here if you wanted to go that way, but it doesn't matter. Then you go down here to Forms Advisor and Forms Tutor. Now this is where it kind of got a little slow, so let's see. Okay, it came right up. And then the Forms Tutor is the second one. You access that. Are you with me, Tara? Okay. Then it's going to ask you to sign in. And then it brings you to this screen here. And like I said before, all the other forms are right here. Up to 100 forms are on here. Residential listing agreements on here as well. You can do the exact same thing with the residential listing agreement, which is another important contract, obviously. And so when you click here, Tara, it says click here to share the consumer RPA summary. And then you get this email. Now, my recommendation is you email yourself, especially if you're new and you want to go over these contracts. This is a perfect way of self-training. So you just put your email, I email it to myself, and then I hit share. And now it's going to email me. And that's what I could not bring up, so I apologize. That was, I don't know why it didn't, because I did it with Michael yesterday and it was fine. So I don't know what the deal is today. So when you get that, Tara, you're going to get that email, and you just click on the link and it'll bring you exactly to where we were earlier. with the forms right here, okay? And there's a password. The password is good for 60 days, 60 days. So you can write it down somewhere and just go back and forth. You don't have to get to use the password, get a new password each and every time, but it'll come with it, but it's the same password. So, you know, again, use it to train yourself, self-train. Use it when you take your listing, and you can have your client go over it just in preparation of getting an offer down the line. And when you get the offer within 24 to 48 hours, send it again, or send it for the first time if you didn't send it during the listing period. And just tell your client to go through the entire form and call you with any questions, any further questions.
Okay, and then there's one more that I'm seeing. Derek asked, do fixtures come into the RPA at any point?
Fixtures are in the contract, Derek. Good question. Fixtures are those that generally are affixed to the property, screwed in some way. Not a nail with a picture and you can lift the picture off of it, but if the picture is screwed into the wall, it's considered real property. If you screw in a bookcase, it's going to stay with the property. All of your fans and light fixtures, your drapery, believe it or not, if the pole is affixed to the wall, is considered real property. And it does explain that in the RPA, what a fixture is.
Yes, and for example, if you're on a listing, and Vicki, I will verify that this happens. And in the dining room, they've got a chandelier, and it was great grandma's chandelier. Tell them, and they're going to take it. Tell them to take it down and replace it with something comparable or something nice, because California real estate law, Murphy's Law, seems to be they're going to fall in love with that chandelier and expect it, and now you're going to get into an argument about whether it's going to be included or not. So anything that they're planning that's a fixture that they're planning on taking or replacing, have to do it before you start marketing it.
Okay, thank you. For some reason, I can't get back to my main thing. Any other questions?
No.